Former Free State Human Settlements MEC Mosebenzi Zwane has denied he had a hand in selecting contractors for the R1 billion housing project in 2010. Zwane was testifying before the State Capture Commission yesterday. He explained how over 300 contractors had bid for the project, even though some of them had been disqualified from an earlier disputed open tender process. Zwane says he signed off on the understanding that all the contractors had been properly verified. The MEC had also earlier said he did not read the Housing Act. So let's get some analysis, not only on this story, but on a very busy news day yesterday. We've got political analyst Ongama Mtimka with us. Ongama, great to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here, Leanne. Good morning to your viewers.
As Sakina said, we'll get some analysis for the last, she was about to say week, but then remembered, gosh, it was only a day. Yesterday, just yesterday's news events had us all glued to what was going to happen next. So, but let's start off with what happened at the Commission of Inquiry yesterday into state capture. Your thoughts on former MEC Zwane's testimony?
Sure. Not only can a week be long in politics, but a day too. Very interesting things there. I think what we need to factor in interacting with the testimony of Mosebenzi Zwane, as well as all its dynamics, are developments which I have found in my research on the political economy of transformation in the construction sector. So, among some of the preferred methods of allocating work in that sector, especially by emerging business people who elsewhere they've been referred to as entrepreneurs or political entrepreneurs, is one, an extreme aversion for competitive processes, no preference for supplying compliance documents, and allocation of work on the basis of lists rather than competitive processes. Because what you see in terms of the facts of the matter now, Leanne, is that the tender process itself had been yielding some positive results in terms of a mix between emerging contractors and established contractors. Now, that was discarded, obviously, for the list, which is now which was a focus of yesterday's testimony. Which there's one message that's clear, notwithstanding how he was sidestepping questions there, that this was a politically controlled process, going all the way up to EXCO, and not only is Mosebenzi Zwane liable or should be held accountable for the list that was used illegally, but that entire EXCO. Obviously, he was cagey about information that could, lead to a more, conclusive, determination of the role of EXCO. But what he has given is enough to infer that, in fact, EXCO overrode what was otherwise a fair and an open competitive tender process. And as such, that entire executive should be held accountable. I think that's the gist of yesterday's message, notwithstanding the dilly-dallying of the former MEC.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting, though, because, I mean, as you're saying, he signed off on all contracts with the understanding they had been properly verified, and even stating that he didn't necessarily understand the Housing Act. I mean, how is this possible? How can we have leaders like this in power?
So let me speak to the crux of that, Leanne. So one of the things that's happening here is a clash of values and a failure to understand the basic tenets of a constitutional democracy. And in fact, the correctness of those at CODESA that chose to make South Africa a constitutional rather than a parliamentary democracy. It's a parliamentary system, but a constitutional democracy. What that means is that the rule of law matters more than power configurations at a particular time. Now, this group that was in power at the time In fact, they make us understand the whole gangster state thesis. Because for them, to go back to the point I was making about clash of values, to them, they see nothing wrong about an exercise of political power that was not limited by legality. So legality was not even a factor in the decision making. So the emphasis on reliance of the interpretations of officials on some of the legal prescripts is just used by him post facto to try and justify how they disregarded the law. I doubt very much that questions of legality and compliance were even a factor in the decision making that was made from the minister all the way up to the EXCO. So you cannot then expect from people who did not respect the law or legal procedure in their decision making and expect that in answering about those decisions, they are going to show some degree of appreciation of the centrality of legality and procedure in their decision making.
Yeah, I mean, you know, exactly what you're saying is what we heard. I mean, Zwane basically conceded that more than 300 contractors expressed interest in the housing project, but only 100 were actually allowed to bid. And he gave some reasoning saying that he didn't instruct officials to abandon the open tender process, but he wanted women, youth, and the disabled to be included. Is that reason enough?
No. So if you look at what the report from the bid adjudication committees, what was cited on that from that report, you can see that the official process had been fair enough in the sense that not only do you have emerging contractors being 3 times more than the number of established contractors, you also had a sense in which the allocation would have been, consistent with transformation objectives. So what is foregrounded as having been a transformation imperative is in fact an attempt to benefit specific people. And Leanne, I was saying earlier on that in my study on the political economy of transformation in Nelson Mandela Bay and the role that is played by organized but informal businesses, this is part of the modus operandi, that it is not necessarily the principle of transformation itself that ultimately informs who gets to have work, but rather alliances which are deep state alliances, patronage networks. And so it could, the executive there could not have allowed what seems to have been a fair process which resulted in 81 contractors that were emerging, which means it's impressive enough because that's 81 to 21. Now, they couldn't allow that to proceed, notwithstanding the fact that there were a lot of emerging contractors there, precisely because it didn't have some of these people that were targeted. And the targeting has got nothing to do with the transformation targets as foregrounded by them in terms of youth and people with disabilities, but everything to do with ensuring that a network of patronage or a deep state network is benefiting.
And that's the long and short of it. It really is. I mean, from what we're gathering. All right, I want to move on to another story because there were so many that took place yesterday. I mean, early yesterday morning, we also saw, again, more arrests following from yesterday. The case against 12 people, including the former acting National Police Commissioner, Khomoto Patlani, charged in that multi-million rand police warning light tender scandal. That was postponed until November. And we also saw, as I mentioned early in the morning, while we were actually still on air yesterday, Deputy National Commissioner for Human Resources, Bonang Mgwenya, was the latest suspect to be arrested. 20,000 rand bail is what she's out on. She faces charges of corruption, fraud, money laundering. Now, what do you make of all of this? Are we going anywhere with it? I mean, obviously it's a good development, but people questioning, are we actually going to see anything come of it, or is it again just for show?
for leadership turnaround processes to gain more, to achieve a lot more, you need to build momentum and sustain it. So the saying goes that it's easy to stop a train that is just departing, but one that is already in motion, it's very difficult to stop. Those are the ideas of John C. Maxwell. So the point I'm making here is that momentum has got to be built, and it's good to see that every successive day we are seeing arrests that are linked to grand-scale corruption. We know that this is important because in the report of the NPA last year, this was one area in which there was some underperformance. So it's good to see that high-level crime and corruption is the NPA, among others, are picking up in terms of the ability to investigate and prosecute, cases related to organized crime and high-level corruption within the state. It's important because it sends a very important message to the public that things are turning. Obviously, arrests are important in rattling some of the comfort zone that the political and administrative elite live in, which allows them to continue, to breed this culture of corruption. But there must be follow through, and I'm happy that part of what the NPA has communicated in the Hawks is that they don't pounce on people until they have credible evidence that can lead to successful prosecution.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I think what the big thing that we learned out of this is also the way in which police contracts are actually awarded, and this was a very serious finding that Ngwenya basically enjoyed a close relationship with the company's owner, Vimpi Mantata. And, this is kind of colluding to ensure that that company was awarded the contract. And this is, something really, really difficult for many emerging people to come in. And this is just corruption on another level. But I'm going to leave it there because that's all still developing, and I think you've explained that one to us quite nicely. There's two other stories I want to get through, and that, of course, is what happened on Twitter yesterday. And, of course, this just blew up. And I think I'm speaking about Minister Fikile Mbalula and everything to do with the MKMVA, and then Ace Magashule brought into it, former President Jacob Zuma. I mean, the divisions within the ANC are showing so badly. But yesterday was just another major development in this crack that is coming through. Talk to us. I mean, what are you reading into all of this?
So quite interesting. Fikile Mbalula is sort of in the tweet, in the purportedly deleted tweet, kind of giving us a scope of the key characters that are apparently behind a particular agenda that is framing in public. But on the narrow tour between him and MKMVA, what one sees there is that the center is not holding. On one level, the minister he said some unfortunate things, but as members of the public, I think it's important to get to see, those things play out, because they kind of point to us as to what is the state of the state of affairs politically in the country, and what are some of the things that are brewing. As a result of the recent arrests, we have seen, the ANC in panic mode, a few camps within it on panic mode. So these fights in the public domain are serving to as a dipstick on the state of the party.
Now, I mean, just in terms of where to from here, because what does the president do? When does the president of the ANC step in and say, enough? This is something that's playing out in a public sphere, and it's getting very, very ugly. But there's got to be something that comes out of this. I mean, obviously people talk many times to a breakup within the ANC, two political parties forming, the fight for the heart, the battle for the heart of the ANC. But what happens now? We can continue having these public spats, but where does it end?
So what's interesting about these, Leanne, is the threats people are making in divulging dirty linen or people's scandals. And in the ANC, there's an instrumental relationship with processes of justice or the truth coming out. So people will sit comfortably with information that could potentially incriminate their comrades, but they won't act on it on the basis of pursuing justice and making sure that the party or the country, is saved from having people that swindle resources out of the public fiscus, but will use the knowledge of that information to kind of get their political opponents in line. It's almost like holding a gun against somebody's head. Now, it's good when these things come out as a result of internal fights within the party, because some of them are things that should be followed on, by agencies that ensure enforcement of the law. So what Fikile Mbalula was talking about, for example, implicating MKMVA members in sabotage, which is really unfortunate. So that will only be divulged when there is a political fallout among them. So that's the good part of it. Obviously, it has to be managed at a party and a level. We saw that the Secretary's Office, General's Office reprimanded Mbalula. I thought that they were being biased because even the MKMVA, you don't protest to get somebody arrested. You open a case, and they have if they have legitimate concerns about performance, they engage their own comrade, who's the president, to say, we're not happy with Minister so-and-so. We call for you to fire them. Not waging a protest to have somebody arrested. So if the president comes in, he will need some middle ground, which is balanced.
Yeah. All right. Before I let you go, 30 seconds, your views on what happened with the principal at Parktown Boys. Obviously, we saw yesterday the development in the Enoch Mpianzi case that the principal has actually now officially been found guilty on certain related charges to the drowning of Enoch, and he was fired. What do you think, just very quickly, is this the right course of action?
It is the right course of action. There has to be accountability, and people who show negligence, among other things, do need to face consequences for their actions or failure thereof.
Ongama, thanks very, very much for talking to us. Big day yesterday on the news front, lots of analysis there, and no doubt that they are going to develop today, and we'll keep a finger on the pulse for you. Ongama Mtimka, always a pleasure speaking to you. Right, that leads us up to 7 o'clock.